The French Empire stood tall among the greatest empires that had existed, and its dominion over the global landscape reached about 10% during its peak. The country that's most associated with cinema and baguettes was once a brutal superpower stretching from Southeast Asia to West Africa. Just in Africa, France had control over the land that's now divided into 17 different countries. French cruel occupations, backed by a civilizing mission, enriched the imperial treasures at the expense of common Africans through slavery, extraction, and murder. But what's worse is the fact that the French Empire in Africa persists even today, and it's more efficient than ever under a lucrative and exploitative guise. The main difference is that imperialism used to expand through tanks, but now it can spread through banking. Let's hit that like button for this video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing videos in the future. Welcome to Money-Minded World. In the decades following World War II, decolonial movements surged across Asia and Africa. The French, still suffering from their humiliating loss and occupation at the hands of the Nazis, were keen to hold on to their empire. As a result, they brutally retaliated with uprisings in Indochina, Madagascar, and Algeria. However, it became more and more difficult to maintain holdings abroad, and eventually, France had little choice but to recognize the independence of nearly all of its colonies by 1960. However, Africa was different. The French leadership decided to maintain the existence of their empire in Western and Central Africa in all but name. The plan was simple. A so-called cooperation agreement outlining the future of their relations was required of the newly independent African countries by France. French foreign aid came with conditions. African nations had to give control of their natural resources to France, let French troops stay in their area, and most significantly, their currencies had to be pegged to the franc. Even today, these countries use the franc of the Financial Community of Africa, or the CFA franc. While the French presented these cooperation agreements as an option, they made it quite obvious what would happen if anyone disobeyed. After socialist Guinean leader Sékou Touré said he would rather be poor in freedom than rich in slavery and rejected a cooperation pact with France, the French government resolved to punish Touré severely. To topple the administration, they severed all international aid to Guinea, and a covert operation was initiated to counterfeit Guinean banknotes and distribute them around the nation, because, according to France, these nations were supposedly part of the French community. France-Afrique would become the more common name for the scheme. The goal was to position the former colonies in such a way that French interests would benefit the most. The French were actually responsible for establishing many of the early post-colonial leaders in these nations. Because of their fluency in French and their time spent in France, they were able to blend in with the French aristocracy, and for nearly 30 years, French ambassador Jacques Faucon supervised France's connections with Africa. During that time, he cultivated extensive relationships with African leaders, enlisting their support through bribes and covert operations, making sure they stayed loyal to France. Since 1960, the French have invaded Africa more than 50 times to protect their selected dictators whenever local political orders were endangered. Take Gabon, a nation in Central Africa, as an example. The vast oil reserves and even larger uranium deposits in Gabon make the country strategically significant to France. Even over the course of its history, France's African colonies were geographically close to Gabon. After becoming president in 1967, Omar Bongo quickly established a one-party dictatorship in Gabon, and France coincidentally had strong ties with Bongo. I mean, he was appointed after traveling to Paris for what amounted to a job interview with the French president. As a result, the elites of both France and Gabon profited from the alliance that Bongo oversaw. The French state-owned oil company ELF carried out the oil extraction in Gabon and also extracted uranium to add to France's nuclear weapons stockpile. Because of this deal, Bongo and his family greatly benefited from the French subsidy that went into Gabon's budget. There was even a time when Bongo's net worth was more than $130 million, while Gabon continued to be poor and underdeveloped. Also under Bongo, Gabon suffered the highest infant mortality rates in the world. Not only that, but instead of improving his country's infrastructure, Bongo invested heavily in French politics in order to keep getting French favors. And even today, France continues to station troops in the nation to back him up. The previous colonizers are also very fond of the present ruler of Gabon, who happens to be the son of Omar Bongo. But Gabon is still somewhat of a happy story. Other countries have suffered much worse. As a result of the legacies left behind by France-backed dictators like Jean Bedel Bokassa, other countries, such as the Central African Republic, are among the world's poorest today. However, an even more significant facet of French influence exists. With its status as the last major colonial currency in circulation, the CFA franc is perhaps the most important component, and countries using the CFA franc effectively give up most of their monetary independence because their currency's value is pegged to the euro, meaning that the world's wealthiest nations control the money of the world's poorest nations. As a result, the very diverse worlds of Western and Central Africa are shaped by the European imperatives of fiscal discipline and battling inflation. The existing system requires a stringent attitude to credit in order for an economy to flourish, yet that leads to the opposite. Therefore, exports from these nations will be less competitively priced if the euro appreciates. Take Senegal as an example. The value of the CFA franc increased as the euro strengthened versus the dollar between 2000 and 2009. However, as a result, Thai rice became more affordable compared to Senegalese rice. Consequently, Thai rice ended up displacing Senegalese rice farmers, who had been working to establish their own indigenous rice sector. The export-driven growth that's essential for lifting a country out of poverty is severely hindered by the high prices of domestic items. That's why the majority of CFA franc-using countries' growth rates are so much lower than their neighbors, and many of these economies have been shrinking due to the CFA's prohibition on domestic industry development. The biggest CFA franc country, the Ivory Coast, has seen a real GDP per capita drop by a third compared to 1978. The Republic of the Congo and Cameroon, two other nations that used the CFA franc, also achieved their peak real GDP per capita in the 1970s and 1980s. Local leaders in these nations, who have historically maintained ties to French companies, have every reason to drain the coffers to the gills when economic development slows. These nations have seen a massive outflow of capital, with billions of dollars going into offshore accounts. Thanks to this rampant corruption, these African elites have reached the status of super rich. For example, in 2007, Omar Bongo's daughter-in-law wanted to buy a $25 million property in LA. On the other hand, the French elites also benefit greatly from the system, since they can purchase natural resources at low cost and collect bribes from corrupt economic dealings. The majority of West Africa's major ports are currently owned by a French billionaire, Vincent Bolloré, who is referred to as the King of Africa in France, meaning that colonialism never truly ended in Africa. This is also why academics call in Neo-Colonialism. The structures of economic extraction have only become stronger, even as the branding of empire has faded away. And as an exploitative strategy, this Neo-Colonialism is light years ahead of its colonial predecessors. Because French policy now is to extract all the time, they no longer even have to pretend to care about creating effective governments or raising standards of living. As such, these African nations have been over-extracted, not underdeveloped, and a large portion of France's economic strength comes from its clout in Africa. According to Italy's foreign minister, France would have the 15th biggest economy in the world if it weren't for its African colonies, as they should be officially called. On the contrary, France is among the richest countries in the world, and the French are aware of this. According to former French President François Mitterrand, France would have no history in the 21st century if it weren't for Africa. Naturally, China now poses a threat to France's African dominance and the CFA franc's colonial connotations. To make it seem less French and more African, there are plans to rebrand the money and do away with the most obvious remainders of its colonial origins. But still, France has no plans to genuinely give up the extraction system that has made it a world leader in wealth. The true test, however, is whether or not the new generation of African youth will allow it. But what do you think? Will France continue its colonial system in Africa, or will the countries finally get true freedom? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you soon.